My name is Daniel, and this story happened a few years ago when I was living in a small town in Ohio. At first, I didn't think it was anything worth telling. In fact, I almost brushed it off as just one of those small, everyday encounters that you forget by the next morning. But the truth is, it turned into one of the most shocking and eye-opening experiences of my life. It all started with something as simple as a man needing help with his belt. It was a Saturday morning in late spring. The weather was warm, the sky was clear, and I had just stepped into a little diner on the corner of Main Street for breakfast. I always went there on weekends because they served the best pancakes in town, and because the place had that comforting, small-town charm where everyone knew your name. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with maple syrup hit me right away. I slid into my usual booth by the window, ordered my coffee, and pulled out my phone to scroll through messages. That's when I noticed him. He was an older man, maybe in his late 70s, sitting alone at a table near the back. His clothes were neat but worn, the kind of outfit you'd imagine someone's grandfather wearing. Khaki pants, a checkered shirt tucked in, and a pair of suspenders that looked a little too tight across his chest. But what caught my eye was the way he kept fidgeting with his belt. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was just uncomfortable, or maybe he was adjusting after a big breakfast. But then I saw him struggling, really struggling. His hands shook as he tried to fasten the buckle, and no matter how many times he attempted, he couldn't seem to get it through the loop. His face looked tense, and every now and then, he glanced around the diner, almost embarrassed. Now, I'm not usually the type of person to get involved in strangers' business. I'm polite, sure, but I keep to myself. But something about this man, maybe the frustration in his eyes, maybe the way nobody else seemed to notice him, made me get up from my seat and walk over. "Excuse me, sir," I said gently, trying not to startle him. "Do you need a hand with that?" The man looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw relief flicker across his face. He nodded slowly, his voice soft. I can't seem to get it right today. These hands don't work like they used to." I smiled, crouched down beside him, and helped guide the belt strap through the loop and buckle it. It wasn't difficult. It took maybe 10 seconds, but when I finished, he let out a long breath like I had just taken the weight of the world off his shoulders. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't know how much that means to me." I brushed it off with a laugh. "It's no problem at all. Happens to the best of us." But then, instead of returning to my table, something made me stay. There was something in his eyes, loneliness, maybe, that tugged at me. I introduced myself. "I'm Daniel, by the way." He smiled faintly. Walter. Walter Green. That's how it all began. What I thought was just helping an old man with his belt turned into a story that would change how I looked at kindness, family, and even myself. Walter invited me to sit with him, and I figured, why not? My pancakes could wait. We started talking. At first, it was small talk. The weather, the diner food, the fact that the town had gotten a new grocery store. But as the minutes passed, Walter began to open up. He told me he had been widowed for almost 10 years. His wife, Margaret, had passed away from cancer, and since then, he had lived alone in the same house they had shared for decades. His children, he explained, had moved out of state. His daughter lived in California, his son in Texas. They rarely visited, not out of malice, but because life had simply carried them away. "They've got their own families now," Walter said with a half-smile, though I could hear the ache beneath his words. "I don't blame them. That's just how it goes." I listened. Something about Walter reminded me of my own grandfather, who had passed when I was a teenager. I remembered how he used to struggle with simple tasks, how he would grow frustrated at losing his independence. Listening to Walter brought all those memories back. After a while, I realized I had been sitting there with him for nearly an hour. My pancakes were cold, my coffee long gone, but I didn't mind. When I finally stood up to leave, Walter reached across the table and touched my hand. "Thank you, Daniel," he said softly. "Not just for the belt. For listening. People don't really listen anymore." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Anytime, Walter." I thought that would be the end of it. Just a kind encounter with a stranger. But as it turned out, it was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I kept running into Walter. Sometimes at the diner, sometimes at the grocery store, sometimes just walking down Main Street. Each time, he would wave me over, eager to talk. And little by little, I started looking forward to those conversations. He told me stories about his younger years, how he had served in the Navy, how he had met Margaret at a dance hall, how they used to spend Sundays cooking together. His eyes lit up when he talked about her, even though she was gone. One afternoon, Walter surprised me by inviting me to his house. I could use some help fixing a shelf, he said. If you're not too busy. I agreed, thinking it would be a quick visit. But when I walked into his home, I realized just how much he had been struggling. The house was clean but worn, filled with old furniture and fading photographs. On the mantel, there was a picture of him and Margaret on their wedding day. They looked so young, so full of life. As I helped him with the shelf, I noticed how many little things in the house were broken: light bulbs that needed changing, a leaky faucet, a squeaky door. It became clear that Walter had been living in quiet difficulty, too proud to ask anyone for help. That day, I ended up spending hours fixing things around the house. Walter tried to insist on paying me, but I refused. Friends help each other, I said, and for the first time since I had met him, I saw tears glisten in his eyes. Weeks turned into months. Walter and I became unlikely friends. I visited him often, brought him groceries, drove him to doctor's appointments. And in return, he gave me something I hadn't even realized I was missing: a sense of family. But then came the day that shocked me. One evening, Walter called me in a panic. His voice was shaky. "Daniel, can you come over? Please." I rushed to his house, fearing the worst. When I arrived, I found him sitting in his living room, clutching a letter in his hands. He looked pale. "What happened?" I asked, sitting beside him. He handed me the letter. It was from his daughter in California. She had written to say that she and her brother had been talking, and they felt it was time to move Walter into a retirement home. They were worried about his safety, about him living alone. At first, I thought Walter would be relieved. After all, he did struggle with daily tasks. But instead, he broke down crying. "I don't want to leave this house," he sobbed. "This is the home Margaret and I built together. Every memory I have of her is here. If I leave, it'll be like losing her all over again." I sat there, stunned. I didn't know what to say. But in that moment, I realized how much Walter had come to mean to me. He wasn't just some old man I had helped with a belt. He was my friend,